Today we're going to talk about the best 5 marches to use all together for open field fighting in Rise of Kingdoms. Whether you're deciding which marches you're going to suit up to use in the field or deciding which commander to invest in next, this I think will be helpful. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And when I think about what to use in the open field, the first consideration is how many marches you bring of each troop type, because over time you're going to work on sets of equipment and eventually we'll get formations and armaments that steer you in one direction or another. So this will become something that is somewhat inflexible. You can't change this around very quickly. So the way I think about open field marches is first and foremost, what is the breakdown of infantry, archers, and cavalry? And right now, the best you can do is 1 march of infantry, 2 marches of archers, and 2 marches of cavalry. So let's start with the infantry march. The one best march you would bring is going to be Guan with Skippy. Now we know that in December, we're going to get some new infantry commanders that are probably going to be amazing, and we may have more options for what the best breakdown is for open field. But as of right now, Guan with Skippy Prime is the best combo you can use. You've got the AoE silence, the health reduction, and the shielding from Skippy is extremely good. There's a lot of march speed on this combo. This is what you want to run if you're bringing only 1 infantry march, and right now I think you should. Now when you get to 6 marches, I think you have more options for bringing more infantry. We'll talk about that later on. If you're getting value from this video, do me a huge favor, throw a like on here and subscribe to the channel. I make updated versions of this guide every 3 months, so you'll want to subscribe so you don't miss it. Let's talk now about the 2 archer marches that I think that you should bring. Now, there's no debate really about who the primary commanders are going to be. It's going to be probably Nebu and also Boudica Prime. Now, both of these commanders have a lot of versatility with who you take as the secondary commander. There's a lot of people who will argue that Boudica Isong is actually the best you can do, but with Boudica, you do have many options, and I want to talk about that. If you go with the Boudica Isong route, the thing you're really going for here is just maximum damage. There's not a lot of defensive capability, but the thing I really like about bringing Isong is that Boudica wants to fire off her skills more frequently. Get that skill damage taken debuff going places more quickly, and the rage restoration on Isong does help that happen. I've talked a lot in the past about another commander that will do this for you, and that is Cyrus. Now, Cyrus is a less commonly owned commander, and I feel like he's a fine investment, but not amazing right now. His power level is a cut below the Boudica quality of commander, but he does have instant proc damage and also some instant proc AoE revenge damage if you're getting targeted. He's got march speed, he's got attack. He does work extremely well with Boudica. I have used this a lot. The other commanders that are really good with Boudica include Honda Tadakatsu, because I mean, man, Honda is just like good in almost any commander pairing, it would seem, except pairing with other leadership commanders like Trajan. March speed, little bit of damage taken reduction. He's got a slow. He's doing a lot of things that are really great, and he's got AoE. Now, you could use Boudica and Mehmed, okay? Mehmed is like a worse Honda Tadakatsu. And a couple other options that people still consider would include Tamaris. Now, I personally don't like the Tamaris pairing here. I think Tamaris is a very solid commander, but I think she's better off with a commander that isn't rage hungry like your Boudica is. Ideally, you put Boudica with a horn, you're generating extra rage. Tommy really doesn't want that, and let me explain. Her damage factor will go way down if you fire off your active skills too frequently, which you want to do with your Boudica, okay? She really wants to get lots of stacks of poison, making the target take more skill damage, okay? You really don't, in my opinion, want to pair Tommy with Boudica. I think you're better off running Tommy with Nebu, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The final commander I want to talk about for a Boudica pairing is Artemisia. And Artemisia is really tanky, has AoE damage, and you offset the big downside of Artemisia self-silencing herself. 80% of the time, Boudica Prime will just shrug this off if she's expertised, and you just keep on kicking. So I think the very best pairs that you're looking at with your Boudica Prime are going to be Artemisia or Isong or Honda Tadakatsu. I think those are your best bets. Cyrus, also extremely strong. It kind of depends on what you do with your next commander, which we should talk about now, and that is going to be Nebu. Now, Nebu primary is extremely good. There is a case where we would run him secondary, and I'll talk about that in a second, and I think it's very strong. But if you run the Nebu primary, your options here are Isong, Honda, Cyrus works extremely well. You could pair Gilgamesh, and actually you could use Gilgamesh as the primary in this combo, and that would work well also. There's a lot of ways to run your Nebu. I think the best is probably going to be Honda Tadakatsu. At this point, that's kind of where I'm at. I find Nebu is focused a lot, and he takes way too much damage, and he doesn't have a way to get away. So having extra march speed on whichever commander you pair with him, I think is actually extremely important. If you want to be more offensive, you use Tamaris. But on the flip side of things, probably a tanky pair that I would run if I had it, and I would say this would be my best bet if I had it, would be Henry primary and Nebu secondary. The advantage of the sort of tankiness you get from the support tree is really good. I have criticized Henry for being a sort of a stat stick. Okay, all he's really doing is not bringing big debuffs or AoE damage, but he does reduce damage taken very substantially, both from the support tree and from his active skill, and he's got a lot of march speed, and he's got revenge damage if you're getting targeted, which is pretty nice. You have instant proc damage that you deal back to somebody who's hitting you. So I think Henry Nebu would be the combo I would want to run, especially because I think people try to focus Nebu, but they're less likely to focus down a Henry. So if I were running 2 archer pairs in the open field right now, I would do Henry with Nebu if I had the Henry, which I don't, and I would do Boudica paired with probably Isong or Artemisia as the secondary. In these cases where I'm giving you choices, it's because there's not exactly a definitive, this is the one thing to do. If you find your Boudica's getting focused a lot, then Artemisia is a tankier option than Isong, and you could go the more tanky route. If you find you want to have more damage, then you swap in the Isong because it's a more punchy glass cannon option. This, by the way, brings us to our 2 best cavalry pairings, and I have been watching this really closely because the main reason I'm updating this video is because of information I've got a little bit about Henry, but also now Joan of Arc is here. And Joan of Arc is extremely powerful, and I've learned a lot about what her best pairings are and what I have observed. Top tier teams using an Arc of Osiris, and I think this transitions to open field and KVK, is that they use Nevsky primary, Joan secondary, and then they also use XY primary, and they pair that with William. So I think those are the 2 best pairs to run for your cavalry. XY has to be the primary because of his rage reduction on the active skills. And pairing that with William is really good because you're going to give your armies lots of rage and lots of defense. And the damage you deal from the Nevsky-Joan combo, Nevsky must be primary, is really crazy. And I just want to tell you a story about this. I was testing in Canyon. I was battling against somebody. I was losing every time, and I was using Joan primary, Nevsky secondary. And I decided, you know what? I'm just going to switch it up and try the Nevsky primary. And I won. I completely flipped the result of the battles, and I ran it a bunch of times. I was like, wow, the extra damage I'm getting by running the Nevsky primary instead of the Joan primary was shocking. And I think you really do benefit by having these 2 paired together because of this skill right over here. When troops led by this commander, you have all cavalry, use an active skill, your skill damage is boosted by an extra 35% for 4 seconds. Also, by the way, skill damage is generally boosted by 25%. I think this seems to be the way to eke out the most damage. Now, you could split up Nevsky and Joan. You could run the Joan primary because support tree is very tanky. This would let you put Nevsky behind XY to make that march more tanky. So there's a way you could run this that would be less damage, more tankiness. But if I felt like I wasn't getting pressured too much, then I think I would run it exactly as I shared. XY, William, Nevsky, Joan is how I would run that right now. This brings us to the portion of the video where we talk about, hey, what would you do if you wanted 6 or 7 marches? Or alternatively, if you're looking at this like, man, I don't have 2 sets of cav gear or 2 sets of archer gear, and you're trying to do something else, let's talk about where I would add an extra march of each troop type. And I want to start with the infantry. Now, the infantry is a really clear case, in my opinion, of running a split. You split the two commanders that were perfect together, and you say, okay, each of them is the primary. So you would run Guan with either Alex or Leo or Honda. All of those have their pros and cons. Guan Alex is a little squishy, but the debuff from Alex, man, it is a extremely powerful debuff from Alexander the Great, both the instant proc damage and also the debuff when he's expertised. And also, I mean, the shielding's nice, a lot of march speed. Leo is a slower version. It's a bit more of like a stat stick situation. The only thing that Leo is offering above and beyond just a lot of defensive capability is some extra rage gen. So you get your silences running a little faster. That is relevant. And then Honda is just the all-around MVP for running as a secondary to almost anybody. So I think that the Guan with Honda or Alex or Leo will do great. When you run a Skippy primary, now you have a lot of options for the secondary. You could do Skippy with Alex. You could do Skippy with Honda. You could even do Skippy with Mehmed. Mehmed being the sort of, as I've mentioned before, weaker version, okay, of sort of Honda Tadakatsu. One other thing that you could do that would be not as weird as you would think would be the Mulan secondary. These days, people opt for damage. You see this in Ark of Osiris League. Nobody's bringing Mulan to the middle, but they would not hesitate to bring Mehmed. So I think the better play is probably the damage, but don't sleep on this possibility. If you needed to run Mulan as the secondary, you could do that, and it's not as weird as you would think. Those are the recommendations for your two infantry marches. The split. Guan primary, Skippy primary. Now, if you want to do cavalry, man, you got so many cool options. Saladin, we know, is about to get a museum buff. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but the developers talked about this, and I'll have a card up in the top for that video. I'll remind you at the end. So if Saladin's getting buffed and Saladin has the support tree, it would be really crazy not to use him. Even at 5'5", 5'1", once he gets a museum buff especially, man, he's going to be really kicking. So if you're bringing in Saladin, you're probably pairing him with William. Alternatively, if you're flush with calves, then you could do Chandra, pair him up with William. And I think that would be really good. This leaves XY in kind of a weird spot. So who's the next XY pair? I think it's XY with Honda Tadakatsu or XY with Mehmed. Great options. Honda, obviously stronger than Mehmed. Then you get to your Nevsky-Joan pair, and I wouldn't touch it, man. Nevsky primary, Joan secondary. It's just so much damage I'm finding. So those are the three cavalry pairs I would run if you're trying to get to three cavalry pairs. If you want to get to three archer pairs, you have so many great options, but I think the easy thing to talk about as an inclusion here is Amani and Art put together. Ideally, you run Amani primary. The big downfall of this combo is it doesn't have march speed, not from their skills anyways. So this is really going to be slow. You will notice how slow it is. You will notice that you will get trapped and you get racked, but when you're not getting trapped, you're doing a lot of area of effect damage. Okay. Now, on top of that, I'd probably run Boudica with E-Song, and then you could, alternatively, you could run Boudica Honda. You just have so many options here. But then also, if you're running the Nebu, we talked about all the amazing Nebu pairs. I'm not going to reiterate them. Now, in my opinion, Trajan is the kind of commander you bring in when you're looking at a 7th March. Alternatively, you could use it as a 6th March. I think I've heard so much back and forth about Trajan. My head is literally hurting. I have whiplash from people saying he's the worst commander on earth to recognizing how good he is. And I'm also feeling that pain, okay? So if you're feeling it, I'm also feeling that. I think in a 6th, 7th March, that's when I'm bringing in Trajan these days. And the pairing that I think people should be looking to is either for really, really big fights. You know there's going to be a lot of enemies. You smash with Ethelfled, and you take advantage of all the damage. I made a dedicated video about why Ark of Osiris League champions are using that combo. If you want to watch that, I'll remind you of that at the end of the video. Also, I think that Mulan is a great choice. Don't sleep on the amount of stats that she's giving. When you're bringing lots of marches, and you know you're going to get the benefit of this, one big perk of Mulan that people often forget about is that not only are you getting 20% of each stat, attack, defense, and health, but you also get the 30% march speed. And this is a really good way to escape bad situations or chase an opponent in a way that they really cannot get away. Alternatively, you could go the heavy infantry route if you're going with a Trajan, and you could run Trajan with Skippy. I have done this, and the damage is amazing. It makes it so that Trajan is now not a march that's like trading negatively all the time. But if you run the Trajan Skippy, you are boosting your skill damage. You're getting the benefit of having extra troops, and all the different damage factor abilities that come from Skippy are benefiting. And you're really tanky. So if they focus you, like, fine. That's great news. AoE damage on Skippy just is so good with Trajan. I really like this combo. I feel like one of the weakest combos that I've run in recent history is the Trajan Herald. I'm just not as impressed with that. The goal with that combo was to have Stamford Bridge trigger. You generate extra rage, and that means that Trajan's firing off his skills faster. Man, it's just not cutting it, I find, these days. Now, what's weird is that I think people are moving, especially in Osiris League, more in the realm of leadership talented cavalry gear, which might feel a little excessive for your average player of the game. But just keep in mind that Trajan and Ethel don't really care about the troop type. And in Osiris League, they're bringing all cavalry. I think in KVK, I'm still convinced that Trajan primary is the way I want to go, and that bringing fully mixed troops is the way to go. And if I'm bringing fully mixed troops, I've got infantry. I may as well run full infantry. They're really slow, and there's other really good infantry commanders to pair there. So that's the route I've gone. 3 infantry sets. For better or worse, I guess we'll see once new infantry come into the game, which is happening soon. If you want to see the video where I explained all of the stuff that's coming in-game, and this is going to be big changes, there'll be a card in the end screen right over here. If you want to see the dedicated video talking about the Ethel combos, specifically with Trajan, and how that's being used by Ark of Osiris League champions, the card for that will be in the end screen in just a second.